You're listening to Season 2, Episode 17 of the Attempt Adventure Podcast, a podcast all about travel, finding adventure every day, and seeking out little and interesting ways to make your life more interesting. From Bangkok, Thailand, I'm your host, Michael DeRosiers, joined as always by my co-host,
James Barrett from Dallas, Texas, currently.
James. It has been a year. We're at the end of the year, and we are wrapping up our final few episodes, and they're all going to be coming out hopefully before New Year's. It's been kind of crazy. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry to our guests who have been on the show, and I'm sorry to our listeners who have been waiting for episodes. But there's just the two of us, and it's not easy sometimes. So maybe things will be a little different next year, but hang tight for that.
Yeah, in a perfect world, we'd probably be like, I don't know, neighbors.
Yeah, well, true.
And that would be way easier.
Yeah, the distance and the time zones don't do us any favors, do they?
They really hurt. Like, sometimes it's okay, but because, like, if in the morning, like, I have, stuff I got to do, and in the morning you have stuff you have to do, so it has to be before a certain time or after a certain time.
Right, and I work, usually on weekends I work. That's the problem, too. So it has to be like a weekday for you.
It's like a weekday evening.
Yeah.
We try, and we're trying to be better.
Yeah. I mean, I really do enjoy doing this show, and I want to keep up at it and keep it going. So there will be another episode, I think, where we'll make an announcement about that. But we're looking for help, so if anyone here has any skills, especially maybe social media marketing or audio, video editing skills, maybe hit us up. We can't pay, but...
it'd be out of the goodness of your heart.
It would go on your portfolio if you.
That's true.
So,
true.
But you know what? If you help us build a great product and we monetize, then we would pay you. So, it'd be an investment in your future.
And beyond that, just tips. If there are any other podcasters out there that listen to this, how do you guys do it?
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing is that we both enjoy doing this. It's not like we view it as a chore.
No, not at all.
You know what I mean?
No, right.
And I'm afraid that's how it comes across, because we put out a bunch and then we just stop. But we both really like doing this, and otherwise we would have just not do it. We can, if we didn't want to record it, we could just get on Skype and talk to each other for an hour.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, which we do sometimes. But
yeah.
So I think any advice would be also welcome.
Just time management. We both have jobs, and we both have families, and we both have lives, and it's just hard sometimes logistically to make everything work. That's really our issue, and it takes a lot of time to put out the show notes. It takes a lot of time to edit the show and produce it. So we are doing the best we can. We might have a slightly different format next year for Season 3, but there will be a Season 3, definitely. So
yes, we're not quitting. There will be a Season 3, just probably some changes just to help us.
In any case, James, it's been a little while. Today's episode is one that I've been really excited about for a long time. It is actually an interview with one of my brother's friends named Yona. He has a really fantastic initiative where he leads cultural tours in Morocco's Jewish Quarter as a sort of cultural bridge building enterprise, I guess, social enterprise. It's a really fascinating thing that he does, and we get together to talk about cultural experiences, ethical cultural tourism, and how to build bridges through travel. It's going to be a great interview. You're really going to like it.
And I don't know if you know this, Morocco is one of my favorite countries that I know very little about. I did a full report on Morocco in college, so it is never been, want to go very badly, rooting for them in the World Cup. I got to cook some Moroccan food. I got to, talk to some people from Morocco. It's a very interesting, very beautiful, very vibrant country, and diverse. So, Michael.
Yes, James.
We have been up to a lot.
Yes, we have.
Since we last spoke. The last time we really spoke, we were physically in the same area. So what have you been up to since then?
Well, I've been up to a lot. In fact, yesterday I did something brand new. I went to the Thai Red Cross Fair out at Lumpini Park here in Bangkok. And yeah, all the money goes to raise funds for the Red Cross. But there was tons of great food, like street food and Thai carnival food, and lots of games you could play. So like every government branch had a booth or like a little carnival area, and you could play a game and win some prizes. So like the Department of the Interior had this game where you tried to catch like a little like paper butterfly on a hook, and it had a number on it, and you could get a prize. And yeah, I mean you got to buy tickets, but Department of the Navy had the thing where you go fishing and you pull up a little plastic fish and you redeem it for a prize. And the Department of Corrections had like a bake sale. And the Thai Army Wives Association had a game, and I won this Pikachu tumbler. This really nice,
that's adorable
metal Pikachu tumbler. I know. So I've got my iced coffee in here this morning.
Is Pokemon big in Thailand like it is elsewhere?
I mean, probably the same as in the U.S. It's pop culture, It's just
great.
pop culture now.
It's just good.
It's great. Yeah. It was nice to be out and doing something. So what about you, James? Have you done anything new or adventurous that you haven't done before recently?
Definitely started really working on my fitness and my health. That's what mainly over the past month and a half, something like that. I've done it before, but it's going really well. So that'll be my new one for this episode. Started that again. I'm already feeling way better. Lost quite a bit of weight already. Just being good. I'm tired of being that guy.
Great.
So
no, I think that's really good. And when you're feeling better and you have more energy and you're healthier, you'll be able to do more adventures and stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
What are the biggest changes that you've noticed? Like in the Lose It subreddit, what they call the non-scale victories. What are your biggest non-scale victories that you've noticed?
I'm definitely stronger, and I can tell the difference in how my clothes are starting to fit.
Nice.
Like I don't, when you put on a shirt, you kind of like stretch it out because you're uncomfortable. I don't have to do that with my shirts anymore, which is great. So far that's been the biggest one.
Well, awesome, James. Good for you. I think that's really fantastic.
Hi, Michael. I'm so glad to be on your show. My name is Yona Abeddour. I was born and raised in Fez. It's the oldest city in Morocco, as we, proudly love to share with the world. 10 years ago, it celebrated 12 centuries of, It actually harbors reportedly the first university in the world, which is Al-Qarawiyyin University. Wow. That was founded by a woman in the 9th century, even older than Oxford. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's mind-blowing.
Yeah, so we Fezi people, Fezi meaning like people from Fez, we really like that part of, the historical aspect of our city.
Right.
I then moved to Casablanca, where I lived also for a few years. And Casablanca is the largest city in Morocco. It is its economic capital. And it is a vibrant, city where, it opens to the ocean. And I'm sure from the film Casablanca, the Americans must be familiar with this name, although the film does not, do good to the city itself, meaning you almost, Casablanca. I think it was even filmed in Tangier, in another city, if not in the Hollywood studios.
Well, and most of the film, if I remember, takes place indoors anyway. So you don't get a good impression. Yeah.
Actually, a funny thing, in the film, they mentioned this cafe that's called Rick's Cafe, right? Where, there's the pianist with his fez and, the ambiance. Now, there is today a cafe, this place called Rick's Cafe in Casablanca that is recreated from the film. So they reimagined how, from the film, actually, the place of today is inspired from the film and not the other way around.
Gotcha.
And so it attracts a lot of tourists,
I bet it does.
Course, especially American tourists, because they think, that is the original, place where the film took place, but actually it's the other way around. So that's a funny thing. And in 2016, I moved to Israel, where I currently reside. I did a volunteering program to learn a bit about the complexity of the Israeli and Palestinian societies. And since then, I've been living here in Israel. I'm doing a PhD in anthropology and history about the Moroccan Jewish identities in France and Israel. So I've been also traveling a lot between Israel, France, my original country, Morocco, and I enjoy it so much.
So cool. That is really awesome. I mean, very different countries, but there's definitely some common connections between them, which is a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. But before we do that, I've got a more general question that I always like to ask our guests, and that is, what does adventure mean to you? What is adventure?
I would say adventure for me is exploring the unknown and being open to whatever it might bring. It could be a good experience that you would enjoy it, and it gives you that sense of ecstasy because it's new,
right.
Or it can, end up being, for the moment, a negative experience that eventually it'll make a good story.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on was to talk about the programs that you're involved with, your cultural and educational project. So yeah, tell me about that. So what do you do?
So, growing up in Morocco, which is predominantly a Muslim country, and it has a Jewish minority. So growing up as a minority in this Muslim majority meant, a lot of influences both ways. I mean, there's a lot of influence on Moroccan Judaism that comes from Islam and Sufism and the Muslim culture, and pretty much also the other way around, be it, Jewish influence in terms of food, for example, music,
right.
Even linguistically, the language, like the Jewish dialect might have, also influences on the Moroccan dialect, the Moroccan Arabic dialect.
Oh, wow.
And so I was really I was very much interested in in these two communities, how they live together, not only the good times, but also the hard times. And so when I went to university, that was one of my academic interests and research interests, that is studying the history of Moroccan Jewry, wow. Studying, for example, the history of the Jewish Quarter. And, I grew up in Fez, as I said earlier, and Fez has the first Jewish quarter in Morocco that we call in Moroccan Arabic, Mellah. Mellah means, actually it comes from the word salt in both Hebrew and Arabic. And the quarter where the Jews lived before, it was a salt market that, the Jews who were working there in this salt market, and that's where the naming comes from. And so I was very much interested in learning more about it. And so I was not born in the Jewish quarter because, Morocco was under colonial, or what's, politically correct, the French protectorate, right, from 1912 until 1956, meaning like the Jews already, they started, like, because of emancipation, they started leaving the Jewish quarter and, living outside of the walled gates, right, of the walled quarter. So the Jews moving out of the Jewish quarter, they resided in the new city that was built by the French, meaning eventually Jews were no longer tied, like they did not have to live in the Jewish quarter as before. Now, because of my research, I was going a lot to the Jewish quarter, meeting people who were born there, be it the rabbi, be it researchers, historians, and, learning like as much as I could about the stories, not only the historical aspect, but also the cultural aspect and societal aspect within the Jewish quarter. So the Jewish quarter in Morocco neighbors the royal palace. Okay. And that is for different reasons. Between brackets, Jews as a minority within a Muslim majority, they had a status called dhimmis. Dhimmis means, according to Islam, both Jews and Christians are considered Ahl Kitab, which means people of the book. I mean, you might have heard of it.
Yeah.
And so because they are people of the book, they can live within a Muslim majority, but they needed to pay jizya, a kind of a poll tax, a yearly poll tax in return for protection. And that's what explains why the Jewish quarter is physically located next to the royal palace. And so I was in one of my, fieldwork interviews and the meetings in the Mellah, in the Jewish quarter. I was standing by the royal palace, and I was surprised to see that a group, I think of Americans or maybe tourists in general, a large group, pretty much, with a tour guide, a local tour guide,
yes.
who they were standing before the gate of the royal palace, a magnificent one, beautiful, colorful, with handwork, with handicraft from, different cities. And it took him about 20 minutes just to explain, the gate, just, where everything came from, what was the gift to the Sultan.
Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was very much fascinated. And in the end, he said, as a footnote, he pointed to the Jewish Quarter and he said, and this is the Jewish Quarter. Let's get back to the bus. And you could see the curiosity in people's faces. What? What did he say? Jewish Quarter in Morocco? Are there Jews in Morocco? All these kind of question marks. Because until recently, until maybe the last 2 decades, Morocco did not invest much in its Jewish history and culture and tourism. And so you will not necessarily find, for example, in a tour guide, like in a tour guide book, any aspect on the Jewish history and culture of Morocco. That was then and there where I decided that I need to do something about this. The Jewish Quarter has a large history. It speaks about, Jews were in Morocco more than 2,000 years ago. And I think this is a history that deserves to be told and a story that must be told. And that's where I had the idea to start a project that is called Bab Mellah, the Jewish Quarter. Bab Mellah literally means the gates of the Jewish Quarter. As I said, Mellah means the Jewish Quarter. And so it is actually a cultural and educational project that means to revive the Jewish history and story of the Jewish Quarters, not only in Fez, but throughout Morocco.
So, how do you do that? So what do you do in this project?
It is pretty much organizing tours to people who are interested. So once I started the project, it raised a lot of interest, not only among Moroccans, but also among internationals who wanted to come and visit. And there was a New York Times article about it, actually, and different, media coverage, etc. Because it was big, for a Moroccan Jew to organize a tour to the Jewish Quarter that is, that tells not only, dates and when was the synagogue built and who built it, but, inside stories. So the idea is to organize a tour within the Jewish Quarter that takes, following an itinerary. So, of course, starting with historical background to understand where the Jews come from, how did they arrive to Morocco, what was their status, what languages did they speak, how were they involved within the larger society, how were they viewed by the larger Muslim society, what did they go through? There were also pogroms. These are also things that I highlight. Why is their Jewish Quarter separated from, the rest of the population? Things like that. And so the itinerary followed, for example, going to the Jewish cemetery, learning about its history. There's a nice museum towards the end of the cemetery. There are 2 synagogues that were, 17th century synagogues that were renovated recently, and they speak tons of also the diversity of the Moroccan Jewish population. So in Morocco, even though today we say Moroccan Jewry, actually within Moroccan Judaism, there are different categories, if I may say. There is a group of Jews that we call the Toshavim, and these are the Jews who arrived to North Africa more than 2,000 years ago. And so Toshavim, the word in Hebrew, means the natives, the indigenous people. And actually, when they arrived here, back then we're not talking about any nation states or borders or whatsoever.
Right.
Who they found, what they found in North Africa were Amazigh tribes. Amazigh, maybe it is commonly known as the Berbers. These are the indigenous people of North Africa. Politically correct, we say Amazigh, because that's how, the Amazigh people identify themselves. Right. And Amazigh in the Amazigh language means free men. And Berber was actually given to them by the Romans, because they did not speak Roman. And, for Romans, whoever did not speak the language is a barbarian. Right. And that's how, and actually with the coming of the Arabs, they somehow consolidated the use of the word of this terminology.
Wow.
This is the first group of Jews in Morocco. So we call them, and not only Morocco, in North Africa in general. And these are called the Toshavim, the indigenous Jews. Right. What happened, this group was joined by another group of Jews, this time coming from the Iberian Peninsula. In the Iberian Peninsula, they expelled both Jews and Muslims in the 15th century, more precisely in 1492. And because of proximity, a lot of these Jews and Muslims found refuge in Morocco. And so when they arrived to Morocco, they settled in various cities, mainly those that had already an existing Jewish population, such as Fez, Marrakesh, Tetuan. And what happened is, well, you would assume that, two Jewish groups meeting each other, they will coexist and pray together in the same synagogue, for example. That was far from being the case.
Really?
They expelled Jews that we call in Hebrew Megorashim, literally the expelled Jews, and who are Sephardim. Today maybe we know the dichotomy of like Ashkenazi Sephardi, but it is more complicated than that, because within the Sephardic world, there are different. So for example, the Toshavim that I talked about earlier, the indigenous Jews, are not necessarily Sephardic, but only those who were expelled. But today we just tend to mix everything up. And because, to generalize the use of the word Sephardim to Jews coming not only from Spain and Portugal, but from the Arab and Muslim worlds. These two groups did not necessarily coexist. Two Jewish groups who did not exist. Actually, they came with their own rabbis. They kept their own kashrut, the kosher food. They had their own way of doing things. They had their own rites, prayers and music and singing, etc. So what they did is that they built their own synagogues within the Jewish Quarter. And so that's why, for example, today in the Jewish Quarter of Fez, back to our original story, is you find, for example, a synagogue of the Toshavim, which is called El Fasiyin Synagogue, El Fasiyin meaning the people of Fez, and the Sephardim, or the Megorashim, or the expelled Jews, they built another synagogue, which is today known as Ibn Danan Synagogue. Oh. And Ibn Danan actually is the descendant of Maimonides. Maimonides is this 12th century philosopher and rabbi and physician who lived for a few years in Fez before moving to Egypt.
For someone like me that really just doesn't know about all of this history, it seems very complicated. And I guess that's where having someone who knows about this to be able to guide people around is so valuable. So what are some of your favorite sites that you can see in the Jewish Quarter that you'd like to take people to that really give them the feel of the history, the culture, and just the feel of that place?
Definitely, and you might find this surprising, definitely the Jewish cemetery. Interestingly, Jewish cemeteries in Morocco and maybe in other places in the Jewish world, we call them Beit HaChaim, which means the house of the living. Now, you might find that paradoxical, right? We're talking about cemetery. What do you mean? Like we're going to a place of the living. But because there is a notion in the Torah that says that when someone passes away, the body that is buried under the ground, but the soul goes up to the sky. Somehow they can still hear you. They can, you can still pray to them. And that's why there is a strong culture of saint veneration among Moroccan Jewry. So this means, veneration. And there's also the word we have for it in Hebrew is Hilula. And Hilula is celebrating the anniversary of the death of a righteous person or rabbi by, going to their tomb, praying, singing, drinking a lot, and pray, and also asking for favors from this rabbi. And there are a lot of stories about, people who were healed because they went to venerate a certain rabbi, or people who could not who could not conceive, and they went to pray, for example, to Lala Sulika. Lala Sulika is a righteous woman who is buried in the cemetery of Fez, and they could conceive. A lot of stories like that, So going to the Jewish cemetery, it gives you a feel of layers of Moroccan Judaism. I mean, there are many people who say, oh, come on, this is superstition. Even if one would regard it as superstitious, but still it was important to the culture. People.
It's the culture.
It is part of the culture.
Right.
Exactly. Which, interestingly enough, it continued even when Moroccan Jews left Morocco. This culture of saint veneration continued with them, for example, in Israel, where there are also a lot of tzaddikim, righteous people, and rabbis where they are buried. So this is one of the sites, and it's also just a nice, peaceful place that is, really well taken care of. Everything is whitewashed. It's very calm. It's a place really pretty much for meditation as well. Because after all, it also serves as a reminder. That is one, but also the synagogues. I think because the synagogues also, they have a lot of stories. And I will share with you one of these stories.
Please.
So earlier I mentioned a 17th century synagogue called El Fasiyin. that is found in the heart of the Jewish Quarter in Fez. Starting from the 1950s and 1960s, a lot of Moroccan Jews left Morocco, either by choice, because they wanted to go to the Holy Land, to immigrate to the Holy Land, what do we say, Aliyah, to live in Jerusalem or in the Holy Land, or because they were compelled to leave because there were some anti-Semitic feelings. There were, especially after the establishment of the State of Israel. So people left in masses, which means that they left also their houses. They left the synagogues, right? Who moved into these places were the Muslim families, Muslim friends, neighbors, etc. So this synagogue, Al-Fasin synagogue, was inhabited by a Muslim family for some years. And then it was turned into a gym.
Wow.
Yes.
I was not expecting that.
I know. It is a fascinating story where, the 4 pillars were actually turned into a boxing ring.
Oh, that's so interesting. Huh.
What is fascinating about this is the owner, who is a Muslim person, every Friday night, he used to light candles because he knew from his Jewish friends or Jewish neighbors that Jews light candles on Friday night, to welcome the Sabbath. And he knew that place was holy and sacred. That was once a synagogue.
Wow.
So in respect of that sacred place, he continued lighting candles.
Wow.
I was told this story actually by Simon Levy, Zichrono Levracha, who was, may he rest in peace, who was a Fez-born Jew and he was actually also the director of the Jewish Museum in Casablanca. And it was very much, that was the synagogue where he prayed with his family. And it was very much important for him to renovate, first of all, to buy back the synagogue and renovate it and turn it back into what it was. He told me this story because that's how he heard it from the person, that passed it on to him. And he knew, this Muslim person, he knew that one day Jews will come back. And, and when I say come back, not all the Jews left. There is still today a Jewish community living, in Fez. The majority are based in Casablanca. We're talking, in terms of numbers, not a big number, about 2,000 people in a population of about 34, 35 million, which is almost nothing. Right. But still, it is a vibrant and meaningful community that is given a lot of regard by, the government, by the king, by the rest of the population.
And that's something that, like I said, people don't know about that. I think that a lot of, at least people outside of Morocco probably just haven't heard these stories. And I think that's why what you do is really important.
Part of these tours, I got to also give, let's say, VIP tours to different stars. That's exaggerating. Part of these tours, I also got to meet and give tours to some renowned people, be it like artists from Israel and other places. Actually, one of the ones I remember is a tour to the ambassador of Canada to Spain.
Wow.
Who, when they contacted me, I was like, the signature was very official. So I was very proud, to take them on a tour. And they were really nice people, down to earth. Also, House of Lords from the UK. And I got myself an invitation to the House of Lords.
Wow.
But to be honest with you, let's say the most remarkable tour that I've given was to a group of students from Morocco, 8th graders, who study at the American school in Fez. And so in together with their professor, we organized the tour to the Jewish Quarter. Now, in order to make it fun for them, I had to think of interactive ways, some games to catch their attention.
Right.
And so I remember we played this game where, for example, how Hebrew and Arabic are really close as Semitic languages, that they can sometimes even sound the same, especially certain words. So I would, for example, give them a word in Hebrew and they have to guess what is the word in Arabic, its equivalent in Arabic. And they got really competitive and it was so much fun. And when we went to the museum, and I'm telling you, this is a group of mostly Muslim students. And this was their first encounter with the Jewish, I'm not going to say Jewish community, but the Jewish history.
Right.
Because, as I said, even though there are still Jews in Morocco today, but it's a very small number. So I'm telling you, for example, in Fez, there are about 30, 40 people left in a city of 2 million.
Right.
So you barely
smaller than I even
Jew,
thought. Right.
And so when we reached the museum, the Jewish museum, so I would give them an item, for example, that they need to look for. So be it a Torah scroll, some photographs, a wedding dress, and they all had, little tasks that then they presented to the group, what they gather, what they think they mean, how are they, what do they know about them, what, if they are similar. Because let's face it, after all, most things that, Moroccan Jews, in Morocco, as Moroccan Jews, they had a lot of things in common with the larger culture, that is Moroccan culture. And so the wedding dress would maybe differ a little bit from, the Muslim wedding dress, for example, but it'll be like the same materials, etc. Even actually religiously speaking, Islam and Judaism, they have a lot in common in terms of the prayers, the fasting, the ablutions before prayers. And so these are also things that I highlighted during this specific tour with these Muslim students. And it was fascinating to see how, they learned something. It opens up your mind to difference, to people who are different from you, to people that maybe until that point you only knew about them through media, and we know how sometimes media can distort certain images. So for me, that was one of the most important and meaningful tours I have organized. That's what I wanted to share with you.
I love that. That reminds me so much of that quote by Mark Twain, where he said that travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. Once you start meeting people and hearing their stories, you kind of realize, it's the differences that make us interesting, but it's the similarities that are really what's important.
This is really interesting because, I couldn't agree with you more on that note, because in this specific context, these are people who live with you. These are people who share the same language, the same food, the same space. Still, they are somehow considered strangers, or they are not within reach. And so it does indeed feel like traveling in time and space to meet these people who could be your neighbors, who could be your doctor, who could be your friend.
Well, was there anything that in your research just surprised you that you didn't know about before you started sort of trying to discover it yourself?
Well, remember when I said that a lot of Jews left Morocco starting from the 1950s and 60s, one of the main destinations was actually Israel. Not only Israel, there was also France, Canada, etc. But the main destination where larger numbers left and settled is Israel. The Moroccan Jewish population in Israel constitutes the second largest ethnic group after the Russians.
Wow.
So that shows how, the presence of Moroccan Jews, and therefore not only, and also their culture is very much visible here in Israel. The Moroccan Jewish population is the second largest here in Israel today, meaning that also the Moroccan culture, some aspects of the Moroccan Jewish culture have been transferred to Israel. And so be it music, be it food, what actually surprised me when I moved to Israel in 2016 is how the second and third generations of Moroccan Jews, those who were born in Israel, they consider, first of all, they talk about themselves as Moroccans. So when they ask me, where are you from? I'll say, I'm Moroccan. They will be like, we're all Moroccans. Where are you from? they just assume that I come somewhere from Israel, but then no, I'm really from Morocco.
Actually from, wow.
Exactly. And that's where they're like, oh, okay.
Interesting.
And to tell you how for them, it is a big part of who they are, of their identity, of how they understand themselves.
Wow.
And so they constructed for themselves a Moroccan identity, sometimes even without being in Morocco, just through, the stories that they heard about Morocco, through what has been transmitted to them from their parents and grandparents. And so the music, for example, here in Israel, you can go to learn Moroccan music. Well, when I say Moroccan music, it's specific. There is music that is called pioutim, which is kind of sung liturgical poems that one can learn here, like with Moroccan melodies, with the, maybe if you know of Andalusian music. And so here it'll be sung, with the melodies of Andalusian music. Wow. And I think it's just fascinating. So it was really surprising to see how the Moroccanness, if we may call it, through as I said, through music, through food, through the language, through the history, through, the connection to Morocco is preserved here in Israel.
That's really interesting. I guess that I'm not sure if this is just me theorizing, but I imagine it's something to do with the nature of Israel, kind of like the nature of the U.S., where you have people that are coming from many different parts of the world, maintaining that aspect of their culture. And I guess there's just something about a country of immigrants like the U.S. or like Israel that encourages that, right? That encourages people to try to identify with their heritage.
I must say that in the beginning of the state of Israel, that was not encouraged. Totally the opposite.
Is that so? Yeah.
It was, with the first, Israel as a place, that ingathered all the exiles, actually they wanted to mold all those identities, all those differences into one Israeli identity that even back then, they did not figure out what is Israeli identity. Is it speaking Hebrew? Is it being white? Is it being Ashkenazi? Is it being a kibbutznik, like part of the kibbutz, etc.? But with the second and third generations of different ethnicities here in Israel, it is becoming even trendy to celebrate the difference. Wow. But I think the process, for example, the first generation they went through is that they had to stop speaking the language, the original language they spoke, and speak only Hebrew. They had to let go of some traditions, of some customs of the old country, and adapt to the country where they were building.
Oh, right.
But now, with the second and third generations, there is a kind of reviving, reconnecting, reaffirming, their original cultures and languages. And for example, again, I'm sorry, just because I love music, so I always go back to music. And you can see how through music today, people want to sing the music of their original country. And it is in Arabic. And so you find, for example, one of the examples is Arabic. Not only, of course, there's also Ladino, there's Yiddish, there is different languages, that the Jews spoke before arriving to Israel. And so this music is performed in, national theaters. Wow. And I find that fascinating, and it's very powerful, this ability to say, okay, I am Israeli, but I am also something else. I also come from, I have this long history that predates, even, the modern state of Israel. And I think that is very powerful to give, to have that ability to express, our both who we are and how individual we are, but at the same time belonging to a larger group.
Wow. For outsiders who want to connect to a culture, it can be a little bit overwhelming or a little bit intimidating. People can feel shy or awkward or nervous. So if somebody is traveling, not necessarily in Morocco or Israel, but anywhere in the world, and they want to maybe understand some of this history, understand some of this story, how can they do that? What advice would you have for somebody that wants to learn more about a culture when they're traveling somewhere that's different for them?
Well, first of all, I think we all do some research beforehand, right? Some internet research to try to learn, especially places that are new to us, because maybe common places, maybe we've learned about them, we've heard about them, but places that are new to us can be tricky. Yeah. I would say always getting in touch with the locals and coming really with a humble personality and modesty. Because sometimes, why I say that, because sometimes when we come from a certain place, we tend to compare, oh, back in my place, it's not like that. Back where I come from, it is not like that. And we're somehow, blocked in that point of reference where we cannot, see beyond. Yeah. And so I'll just say coming with open spirit, going with this adventurous sense, exploring things, trying things out, even if they're, new to you. So trying them for the first time could be also something that might, open your mind about their world. And just, as as an anthropologist, somehow just go in and try to live their way of living, spending maybe one day where you can, just take off your tourist hat and just try to adapt and to try out anything they offer you, or that you could, you can be part of course, with respect and, with also humility.
Right. No, I like that. Yeah. This is a very small example, but one of the things I like to do when I'm traveling is go to a local supermarket. It's a very small version of that, but it's interesting because you think, oh, this is what the people that live here do. This is how they go shopping. And you see things that are fascinating. I was in Malaysia a couple of years ago, and I went to the supermarket to get some, I don't know, just coffee or something to have at the hotel. And Malaysia, of course, it's a predominantly Muslim country, but there's also freedom of religion there. And so the supermarket had a section that I just thought it was really funny. It was called the non-halal corner. So you walk in there and you've got walls of beer and, all this stuff. And I was like, well, that's such an interesting aspect of the culture here in Malaysia, that you wouldn't see necessarily in the US or in other places that I've been here in Thailand. And, it just kind of gives you a glimpse at that daily life,
Exactly. Yeah. I also personally love places of worship because I find them very meaningful. I love to see how people and observe how people worship, how people, respect the religion, how they also many times they want you to be part of it. Even if you sit back, you want to go unnoticed, they would still invite you in and welcome you and maybe explain things to you. And I love that part. I remember when I was in India, I went to a temple and actually it was the anniversary of Shiva. And I just loved it. I loved it so much. I love the mantras. And at some point they share some food, some traditional food, for the holiday. Right. And I was very happy, to also get my share and, eat it. And they, you can see a smile on their face. This person who maybe has no idea what is going on is still open, to
willing to
part of
something of what we're doing. Right.
Exactly. And I love that. I love going to, to mosques, to churches, to synagogues, and to places of worship, because I think religion is a big part, even if worship or not, even if we're believers or not, but it still has a big impact on our culture.
Definitely.
And our cultural, traditions, and somehow also part of us, even indirectly or subconsciously. And I love that. I love to a little bit to understand, what this verse means, or why do you worship like that, or why things also what is in common between different religions and different beliefs.
Yeah, I love that as well. That's one of my favorite things to do too. I think that's amazing. And it feels so good, especially like you mentioned, when people allow you to experience that with them, when you're sort of welcomed in that case, because religion is such a very personal thing. And it's such a great feeling when you are allowed to join in with that. It really does give you that feeling like, well, I'm accepted here. I'm part of things, even if, like you said, even if I don't know exactly what's going on.
Again, I feel like when it comes to people's beliefs, they are very willing to share. Like, imagine going to spend a Sabbath, whole, Friday night dinner and maybe Saturday with a Jewish family somewhere, or maybe experiencing Eid al-Fitr, which is the after the month of Ramadan for Muslims. So there is a Eid, holiday of Eid al-Fitr. So imagine experiencing that joy of, sharing the food and, visiting friends and family, or, Christmas, of course. Yeah. I mean, we all love Christmas, and it's been, so isn't that a pleasure, just to be part of something that is not necessarily, part of your culture or how you grew up, but still you get to experience it, with the family. That's also definitely a way to learn not only about the holiday and, the beliefs, but also about the culture in general and this aspect of traditions.
It just enriches you so much. Well, let's see here. Let's talk about food as well. That's another big part of the culture. So when you're doing your tours, is food an element of that?
Food is definitely part of it, of my tours. Actually, it is what so my tours normally, they last for about 4 hours. And so the food is what people look forward to after the tour. And that's what keeps them focused, because that's the reward that they will deserve in the end of the tour.
Right.
And I always eat in Casablanca, Marrakesh, or Fez. We will end the tour in the Jewish Community Center or in a kosher restaurant to experience the Moroccan Jewish food. The kosher food with, nice bottle of wine or some beer. Right. And because, the food in the Moroccan Jewish food, again, it is very much similar to Moroccan food in general, but there are some different dishes, that are made differently. And for example, there is dafina that is known by its different names, either dafina or schina. And actually it is a kind of stew that is made that stays over over the night in the oven, in the public oven, because during the Sabbath Jews are not allowed to cook, and so on Friday afternoon you already today in modern ovens you leave it in the oven, right, cooking slowly, and you eat it only on Saturday at noon or afternoon. And that is actually one of the main Moroccan Jewish dishes that Muslims love, and they love to experience it and to go to Jewish places to eat. So that is an example.
Now, Kyle was just texting me, and he wanted me to figure out how to word this question. So he says, this is a message Kyle just sent. He says, so ask him to tell you about the relationship between the micro level of tourism, educational and relationship building, and the macro level of understanding and cooperation in the region. He says you might need to find a better way to word that. So let me see if I can figure out how I want to say. This is the one thing he wanted me to ask. So with tourism, tourism and traveling, that's sort of the micro level of relationship building, educational understanding. But what is the relationship between something like that, like you do, and the macro level of building understanding and cooperation throughout the region? Because that's a big issue, a very big issue in that part of the world.
Wow, that's a great question. So for me, these tours are not only experiencing the Moroccan Jewish culture. It is not, of course, that is a big deal of it, right? That's a big part of what they are meant for. But also, when I give the tours, I also highlight, for example, Muslim-Jewish relations. I highlight the Islamic influence on Moroccan Judaism, the Sufi influence on Moroccan Judaism, and the other way around. And that, for example, if you do, like when you go to a Moroccan synagogue, if you are a Muslim from Morocco, it will all sound familiar, but in a different language, and maybe for a different religion, right?
Right.
But it is all similar. That shows how, these two cultures, these two religions, these two traditions, they communicated with each other, they influenced each other. When people see that, and they notice that, and I also talked about the group earlier of Muslim students, young Muslim students going to encounter these Jewish places, they understand in the end that there are a lot of things that are in common. There are a lot of similarities, that we kind of speak the same language. Maybe different religions in different prayer places, right? But still, we worship the same God, and we have, the same goals in life. I think that inspires people in the sense that if it is possible in Morocco, Jews and Muslims living together, even having influence on each other, communicating in the same language, that is a model that can be exported to other places, probably with conflict, right? And today that Morocco, again, has, diplomatic relations with the state of Israel, now there is a lot of traveling back and forth. And, again, as you said, when you travel, you actually meet with people, you meet with the culture, you see how they are doing their things, how they're living, things that they are successful in. And that's what you bring back home. That's what can inspire you. And that's what you want to import back home. And I believe that Morocco has a role to do in the Middle East, in bringing peace, in helping at least bridge building, like opening the dialogue, starting a dialogue. And I think Moroccan Jews, even in Israel, they've been part of that. Not only, of course, but many other, Jews and Muslims and Christians. But Morocco has this ability to, first of all, as a country with a long history of Judaism, as we talked about earlier, and with the role of the king as the commander of the faithful, who, for Jews and Muslims are considered equals in Morocco, at least today. I mean, there were in some historical eras where that was not necessarily the case because of the status they had of dhimmis. But Morocco can give an example, like can sit back again, people on the table for discussion. And actually, just yesterday, I read on the news that, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Morocco is willing to reopen dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians. Wow. And I think that is that can only be blessed, and that can hopefully, I mean, we just can keep hope, right?
Right.
To, closing the gaps and bringing people together.
Exactly. As long as there's dialogue, there is hope. Going back to the previous point, so the defender of the faithful, is that in regards to all faiths?
Exactly. It is in regards of all faiths.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
And yes, so commander of the faithful. In Arabic, it says Amir al-Mu'minin, meaning not only the Muslims, but all the believers.
Wow.
Whoever is, every religion that lives under the monarchy, the king is considered the commander of the faithful, and he has to assure their protection and their freedom.
Wow.
So I think that is not something to take for granted.
Definitely. That's really interesting. I had no idea about that. Wow. I do think that's very important. And that's a really important symbol of the unity that you can find, even amidst the differences, I think. Wow.
Yes.
Well, are there any last messages that you would like to give to the Attempt Adventure listeners?
I can't wait for you to go visit Morocco. Morocco is a beautiful place. It's a beautiful country. You can find documentaries, you can find films about it, you can find books, etc. But I would say talk to people, learn Morocco. In Morocco, the tricky part is that Moroccan Arabic is so different from the other Arabics that people might know, even from very different from the standard Arabic. So Moroccan Arabic can be tricky, but still we'll always find a way to communicate. Trust me, even if you don't speak a word in Arabic or French, because also Moroccan people also speak French, you will always find a way to communicate. And Moroccan people are really hospitable. They're smiling. They, it's fun to be with. They love to have a good time, to show you around. That's also something that is known with Moroccans. Like, we get really excited to show you places and historical places.
Well, I think that's great. Well, if we ever get over to Morocco, we'll bring our microphone on, and you can take us around the city, and we'll make a special episode, an episode on the
definitely. I have one more actually. Suggestion. Is that sometimes people combine Spain and Morocco, and I love that. So either you start in Spain or in Morocco, because also these two countries, they had also centuries of history in common. And what I love most about this journey is the ferry that you take from Tangier to Tarifa.
Oh, I love it.
So it is a fascinating experience. Now, it's just almost like a spiritual journey. First of all, it is not that far. You cross in 35 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
From, the African continent to the European continent.
Right.
But as you're leaving, so if you're leaving from Morocco, so the last thing you see, the skyline is like minarets and, the muezzin, Allahu Akbar, and, all that kind of noise of the shuk, etc. And you reach another type of noise, noise that is the church bells, right. Virgin Mary, right. Kind of the same noise, just a different language, a different vibe. And that is something that I find always fascinating, that I always look forward to. And of course, it's beautiful to cross the Mediterranean, the Strait of Gibraltar, that if you're lucky, you can get to see dolphins also.
Wow. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Gotta go. I miss traveling so much. Well, where can people find you if they want to go on a tour? How can people find you and get in touch with you?
They can always find me on social media as Yona El-Fassi. That's how I go on social media. And for Bab Mellah, I also have Instagram and Facebook page called Bab Mellah, BABMELLAH, the Jewish Quarter.
Okay.
So,
we'll put links to all of that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, great.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Michael.
I love this kind of conversation. I love this kind of topic, and I had such a great time. I'm so glad we finally got the chance to do this.
Yes, thank you so much. Hopefully, I can give you a tour in Morocco.
Yes, I will certainly hold you to that. And you're always welcome here in Thailand as well. I
can't wait. Thank you so much.
Very good. Hey, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Had a great time. All right, and we are back. So, Yona, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was so much fun talking to you. I really appreciate my brother for hooking us up and introducing us so that you could be on the show. And as usual, there will be links to all of his stuff on our show notes at attemptadventure.com.
We should give Kyle a producer credit.
Yeah, okay. That sounds fair. So, Kyle, good news.
Put that on your resume.
So Yona, thanks so much for coming on the show, and big shout out to you. All right, James, it is time for our favorite segment, Adventures in the News, and this week it is my turn. Mine is actually a resource. It's gowildgowest.co.uk, and I'll put a link here. It's a site that encourages people to go out and have little mini adventures with their families, and these are adventures that you can do with kids, but they're also adventures I think that adults can do, and they're small things that are ideas of how you can add a little adventure into your life, which is exactly what we are all about here at Attempt Adventure. We are all about micro adventures.
100%.
So just some of these, like cook in the wild, enjoy the sunset, track an owl.
How do you do that? How do you track an owl?
I don't know, build a cairn, head to a hilltop and build a cairn. Stuff like that. Just like little things that you could do. You could do it by yourself. You could do it with friends. It's geared towards families, but anyone could do them. And that's kind of my news. It's not exactly news, but since when is this segment ever really about news? So
it never is. It's usually funny stories or helpful tips. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for being patient with us as we sort of try and figure our stuff out. We're doing our best and trying our hardest. If you want more Attempt Adventure content, you can find us on all the social medias at Attempt Adventure on all of them. You can visit our website at www.attemptadventure.com for great show notes, pictures, find all the episodes. It's a great thing. Contact us directly from that website. That's probably the best way to get a hold of us. And until next time,
keep adventuring.